Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to be exploring a seriously fascinating bridge between a magical, animated fantasy and a hidden, very real-world history. We're talking about the incredible power of lost legacies. We'll see exactly how secrets and forgotten traditions end up defining not just our individual identities, but the legacy of entire nations. It's a really incredible connection, so let's get right into it. Okay, here's a quick look at our roadmap. We'll start with a year on loop and breaking the time loop. From there, we make a huge pivot into fictional myths versus historical truths. Check out the trade hubs of the North, explore the sultanates of the South, and finally wrap things up with reclaiming a forgotten legacy.
All right, diving into Section 1, A Year on Loop, the Magic of the Bronze Lantern.
So in the animated film The Forgotten Kingdom, we meet an elderly lantern maker named Olstein. She finds this magical bronze lantern, and by placing it into an ancient stone lock, she literally traps her entire valley in a secret time loop that resets every New Year's Eve. And, it begs a pretty compelling question. What if you could restart the exact same year over and over again? I mean, we all kind of daydream about the ultimate do-over, right? But we tend to ignore the massive consequences of a totally frozen timeline.
Just to give you an idea of how this looks, here is Olstein's recurring timeline. Every single morning, she skips breakfast, totally avoiding her family so she can desperately search her workshop for a secret blue fire recipe. By the afternoon, a local guy named Keelan repeats his absolute worst financial decisions, eventually losing the actual deed to his house, betting on local pig races. And then, at midnight, the whole town unknowingly celebrates the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival, while Olstein rushes back to turn that bronze lantern and start the exact same year all over again.
Moving on to Section 2, Breaking the Time Loop, the Cost of Living in the Past. Now, you really have to wonder, why would someone intentionally freeze time? Well, for Olstein, it turns out this magic lantern isn't about gaining power. It's actually a desperate attempt to halt a shaking sickness that's taking over her hands. She's just terrified of losing her ability to craft lanterns and ending her family's generations-old legacy. But keeping this secret loop going has a really devastating tragic cost. Because the year keeps resetting, her pregnant daughter is, perpetually pregnant. Her granddaughter can never actually be born. And that brings us to the emotional climax of the story, which is anchored by this incredibly poignant thought. What's the point of holding on to something that's meant to float away? You see, the Valley's whole tradition revolves around building paper lanterns that are meant to burn and float away. It's a built-in reminder that nothing lasts forever. Olstein finally realizes she has to let the old fortress magic burn out. She has to accept her shaking hands so that time can finally move forward and her granddaughter can be born. Which brings us to Section 3, Fictional Myths, Historical Truths, the Power of Lost Legacies.
Okay, this is where we make our big, fascinating pivot from fiction to reality. In our animated story, a town's history is intentionally trapped in a loop to hide from the future. But in historical reality, the pre-colonial kingdoms of the Philippines were nearly completely erased by colonization, which obscured an incredibly rich and prosperous past. For literally centuries, the accepted narrative was that these islands didn't have any great civilizations before foreign powers showed up. And that effectively trapped an entire culture in a loop of a forgotten, diminished history. Let's look into the facts in Section 4, Trade Hubs of the North, Prosperity Before Colonization. We are going to absolutely dismantle that myth right now. When the Italian explorer Antonio Pigafetta arrived in the Philippine Islands in the early 16th century, he didn't find some empty, uncultured land. Not at all. In Cebu, he was actually stunned by the sheer abundance. He recorded seeing sprawling agriculture, things like rice, millet, ginger, bananas, and oranges, along with domesticated dogs and cats, and honestly, staggering quantities of gold. The Rajanadet of Cebu wasn't just scraping by. It was a highly significant, massively wealthy maritime kingdom. But to really put this in perspective, this prosperity goes back way farther than the 16th century. Picture the 10th century. Way back then, the Kingdom of Butuan, which is in present-day northeastern Mindanao, was already operating as a massive, bustling trading hub, engaging directly with China. The wealth here was almost hard to wrap your head around. Pigafetta even noted later on that in this specific region, gold was so abundant that local houses were literally adorned with it. No joke, houses decorated with gold. Let's fast forward a bit to the exact year 1011. Raja Chulan, who was the ruler of the polity of San Milalan over in present-day Zamboanga, sent an official emissary thousands of miles across the ocean to the Chinese imperial court, And they definitely didn't show up empty-handed. They brought lavish gifts of aromatics, ivory, and refined sugar. This wasn't some isolated local village. This was a society with a deeply sophisticated trade network that reached all the way to Western Asia.
When we zoom out and look across the northern and central regions, the sheer scale of this interconnected economy is just staggering. You had Tondo and Luzon acting as this massive strategic hub right along the Pasig River. You had Butuan, with those gold-adorned homes we talked about. Mai in Mindoro was operating as a crucial trading partner to the Chinese Song dynasty, exporting beeswax, pearls, and cotton. And of course, San Milan bridging the gap over to Western Asia. These were highly developed, deeply cosmopolitan societies.
Let's shift our focus downward. In Section 5, Sultanates of the South, sophisticated systems of governance. Meanwhile, down in the south, powerful Islamic sultanates were busy establishing some incredibly advanced systems of governance. The Sultanate of Sulu, which emerged in the 15th century, leveraged immense maritime prowess to run trade routes with both China and the Middle East. Then you had the Sultanate of Maguindanao, controlling the southern Mindanao region and wielding massive regional political influence. And the Sultanate of Lanao operated as this highly unique confederation, basically independent principalities situated around Lake Lanao that governed locally but still shared deep, sophisticated political ties. Finally, let's pull it all together in Section 6, Reclaiming a Forgotten Legacy, Breaking the Historical Loop.
This is exactly where our two themes beautifully converge. Just like Olstein, our fictional lantern maker had to literally let go of her bronze lantern to allow time to move forward, uncovering the true history of the Philippines breaks the historical loop of a forgotten, erased history. It reveals a real-world legacy of thriving kingdoms, mastered trade, and an unbreakable spirit that was flourishing long before any Spanish ships ever arrived on the horizon. And, this isn't just dry academic trivia. It's a living, breathing history that fuels the resilience and the culture of the people today.
Let us remember who we are, descendants of kings, sultans, and warriors. When we think back to our animated movies lesson about the sheer danger of hiding from the past, this historical truth hits even harder. It really highlights the profound pride that is found in a reclaimed identity. It's all about remembering and honoring a nation that was already great, long before anyone else ever arrived to try and tell their story for them. Which brings us to a final thought for today. How do the legacies we remember shape the future we build? Because honestly, whether it's a family tradition passed down from a grandparent or the reclaimed history of an entire civilization, the truth of our past is absolutely the foundation for our future. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep exploring those forgotten histories.